Hey, my name's Logan Olausen. I'm an adventure photographer, filmmaker, and world traveller from New Zealand. Since October 2024, I've been in South America, slowly making my way north, motorcycling, filmmaking, and climbing.
Welcome to the Real Riders Podcast. My name's Simon Josie, and this is the podcast about motorcycling and filmmaking. If this is your first time here, welcome, and thanks for listening. Well, it's finally happened. At last, we have our first Kiwi guest on the show. Logan Olausen grew up on Auckland's North Shore, but has also spent periods living overseas. And when I spoke with him just a couple of weeks ago, he was still in the middle of an epic tour of South and Central America. I've been following Logan's YouTube channel, Escape Artist Media, for about a year, so I was very happy that I could get him on the show. There's one important piece of news that I want to share with you. Together with my friends Clive and Noel from the Trail and Adventure Motorbike podcast, we have launched the Adventure Motorcycle Film Festival. On the 28th of February next year, at the Brewery Arts Centre in Kendal, which is in the UK's Lake District, we will be showing the very best adventure motorcycle films from around the world. The festival is offering 4 prizes, one each for Best Feature, Best Short, Best Film Overall, and there's also going to be a People's Choice Award, which will be voted on by those attending the festival's screening on the 28th of November. The festival is already taking submissions from filmmakers. If you are a filmmaker and keen to submit your film, you can find the festival on the popular FilmFreeway site. There you will find the entry conditions and the deadlines for submission. You can also visit the festival's website, www.advmotofilmfest.com, which has a link to the FilmFreeway submission page. I'll put links to both these web pages in the show notes. Tickets for the festival screening on the 28th of February next year are already on sale and selling quite fast, so if you'd like to join us for the festival screening, don't leave it too late to get your tickets. Okay. Before we get to my chat with Logan, please remember that Real Riders has an account on Instagram where you will find, amongst other things, trailers for each new episode. And if you want to know what I've been watching recently, follow the Real Riders account on Blue Sky. Links for both the Instagram and Blue Sky accounts are in the show notes. If you're so inclined, please consider rating or liking the Real Riders podcast in your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. This will help other listeners find the podcast. Righto, let's get to my talk with my fellow Kiwi, Logan. Kia ora, Logan, and welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me on the show today. How are you and where are you?
Kia ora, Simon. Thank you very much. I'm in Popayan, which is in Colombia.
Cool. So, look, I'm absolutely shit at small talk, as most of my guests know, so I'm going to jump straight into the questions. I understand you trained in graphic design. Have you always been interested in film and video too, or is that something that came later?
It's something I've always been interested in. I didn't really start pursuing it until after I studied graphic design. I did graphic design probably for a good 2 years after I studied, and then I quit my job and went traveling around Southeast Asia. That's where I had a good opportunity to play around with the camera in both photography and filmmaking.
Right. I mean, do you consider yourself a photographer who does some filmmaking on the side, or do you now see yourself primarily as a filmmaker with a background in photography?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of flipped a bit. In the past, it was probably a bit more photography with a little bit of video when I went through Asia. But now, when I'm doing the vlogging stuff on my trip, it's definitely been more focused around filmmaking and video. And I would like to take more photos, but there's only so much time you have. And if you're focusing on one thing, it's best not to try and do everything and put your effort into one thing. And then, yeah, I just try and get as many photos as I can, but not as many as I would like on this trip.
Yeah, sure. Thanks to my internet stalking of you, I know that you did a 3-year graphic design course. What did you learn in that course, and what's been most beneficial from that course in terms of the career that you had as a graphic designer?
Yeah, it's a good question. When I went through high school, it was the subject that I was the most interested in, so I decided to pursue it. it was either graphic design or architecture. I chose graphic design, and yeah, it was an opportunity to exercise my creativity because I've always enjoyed being creative. It was just about choosing an avenue where I wanted to go down. In terms of maybe how it influences what I'm doing now, yeah, it allows me to have a bit more of a critical and analytical perspective on what I'm doing. Through my graphic design career, you have to get used to taking constructive criticism and being, very honest with yourself and your work that you're doing. So I think that's helped influence photography and filmmaking as well. It helps me say, that's not good enough, scrap it, or I need to change that, because I think it's always a challenge figuring out what the audience likes. But yeah, I think through graphic design and my experience in the field, it has helped, figure out what's good for filmmaking as well.
You mentioned this constructive criticism, and everyone's an expert. Is the problem that everyone can take a photo with their camera phone now, and quite a good photo, and sort of everyone's an expert, and everyone has an opinion about what looks good, what doesn't look good, in a way that not everyone has a medical opinion about, a broken arm or a broken leg. It's a it's a profession or a skill that is quite exposed to the outside world, I guess you could say. Is that what you've found when you say everyone, you have to sort of harden yourself to that constructive criticism because everyone has an opinion and everyone doesn't hold back with their opinion? Is that what what you found when you were working in graphic design?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. And particularly when you're putting stuff on YouTube, if you put something up that's perhaps a little bit controversial, or if you try and make something I try not to, but to make something a little bit more clickbaity, because at the end of the day, that's what gets views. You can often end up with a bit of backlash, in the comments, and you just have to, you can't take it to heart. You need to just feel like that's just someone's opinion. Maybe you can take something from it, but don't beat yourself up about it. Especially when you're creating content on the fly, you don't have all the time in the world to think about everything precisely. You're not going to get it exactly right. You're just doing what you can with your time, and then just seeing how it gets received.
Do you find, because you're traveling a lot, that when you do post something that maybe you go offline for a bit and you don't come back and see those comments until quite some time later?
It's happened a couple of times, but most of the time I have data on my phone. I get like a local SIM card, and I do have connection. So sometimes I might, go off grid, do some hiking for like 5 days or something, and then come back, and then you see what's gone down.
Yeah. One thing that I struggle with is that many fantastic photographers seem to be able to transform themselves into great filmmakers too. And while that may seem perfectly obvious to most people because they're, both visual mediums, for me, so much of the art and craft of filmmaking is in the editing. And editing is sort of both a function of the image, but also timing. Timing is very important with editing. Therefore, to me, it's not obvious good photographers should become good filmmakers. But is that like a minority opinion? I mean, do you have a view on whether it's a natural sort of transformation from photography to filmmaking, or do you also see that they are quite separate sort of skills?
Yeah, I mean, I think they both marry up quite well. If you've got an eye for photography, if you've got an eye for filmmaking, I think you're going to be able to do both pretty well. Because I think you can be taught as much as you want about film techniques, photography techniques, and you can still become a decent filmmaker or photographer. But I think it's really the eye. If you're born with that creative eye, I think that's what's going to set you sort of apart from other people, I guess. And yeah, especially if you have that creative eye, the eye for photography, I think you're going to be able to, go between the two pretty easily. I think, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about when you first started filmmaking. Do you remember what it was like, that first experience of actually cutting video, putting sequences together? Because that would have been quite different to what you'd done before. Can you remember what that was like?
Yeah, I definitely remember it with photography. Before I actually went to Asia and started playing around with more of that. I remember when I was in Canada, I did a working holiday and I was just taking photos with my iPhone at the time and then playing around with the filters on Instagram. And I was like, oh, this is really fun, Yeah, in terms of filmmaking, when I started doing that stuff in Asia, yeah, I just found it like really nice. If I had, when I had time on my hands, I'd just sit down for a whole day. And I enjoyed sort of piecing together all the segments of footage, trying to like create a lot of variety within it so it's not repetitive. And then really enjoyed finding the right song because I've always been very interested in music as well. And I've always paid a lot of attention to when I watch a movie, the music that's used because that's kind of half of the experience. It sets the tone, the mood. If there's, the wrong choice of music, it kind of jars with whatever you're watching. So I sort of equally got as much satisfaction as trying to find the right song and then just almost trying to recreate the feeling that I had in that time, when I was traveling in this country. I had this particular feel, I had these particular emotions. So trying to find music to reflect that and also pair with the footage, I found that I found that really fun. Yeah.
On your YouTube page, there's one video that you made from a trip in Vietnam. And though it's not the first video that's posted on the website, it almost kind of looks like it maybe is the first video that you made. Is that me guessing incorrectly? I'm kind of interested in the sequence because it's always, I mean, that's the good thing about YouTube is it generally allows us to see how a filmmaker has developed their skill over time. You can really see that. So when did you make that film relative to the other stuff that you've got on YouTube?
That was actually I'd actually done that video prior to putting it on YouTube. I used to use Vimeo. I used to use Vimeo, and that's where I first started putting videos up. Actually, I did play around with video a little bit more now that I think about it before Asia. Again, going back to when I was in Canada, did a lot of snowboarding, and I did have an action camera then, and that probably would have been the first proper video I actually created. So that was probably when I was like 22 or something like that, 22, 23 years old. So that was actually probably like 3 years before I went to Asia. So yeah, I kind of forgot about that. So yeah, going back to that, that's probably the first time I put something up.
Yeah, because it's there's all sorts of things about that particular video which suggests it was actually made fairly early on. It
Yeah.
doesn't have the same treatment, shall we say, as the films that you made in the UK and in Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't look the same. It doesn't have the same pacing,
Mm-hmm.
but it has a raw energy that reflects probably, I would say, that trip, but also your new experience of putting videos together and being driven by that music. I mean, you talk about the music. Have you ever been in a situation where you've heard a piece of music and gone, I love this piece of music, now I need to build a film around it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And quite often that is the case. Like even when I'm just on a casual day listening to music and I hear something, I'll be like, oh, that would work, really well for a particular film sort of thing. So yeah, music is definitely does influence, what I would do with film as well. And it also really reflects the pace and the timing and that sort of thing as well. Especially when I do videos now, quite often I'll roughly piece together the footage and then I'll find the piece of music that I want, and then I'll go back in and refine the pacing of that footage, like where it cuts. Is it cutting on the beat? Is there like a particular, I don't know, like bass dip in the music that sort of can influence how the timing is used on the video itself? Yeah,
Do you always cut on the beat, or do you vary from that?
not always. Quite often I do. It's kind of been a trend that I've used, but sometimes I just get a bit lazy and I can't be bothered cutting it on the beat all the time, or sometimes it just doesn't really feel that necessary.
Yeah,
So sometimes it calls for it more than other times, just depending on the song and what's happening in the footage.
yeah, for sure. Just going back to the connection between photography and filmmaking, how has making films impacted your photography?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Probably in a bad way, because I don't spend enough time on photography now. So I end up getting the footage I need, and then I'm like, oh, I need to get some decent photos, and they end up being a bit rushed. I'm not quite putting in the time and the concentration into getting the right shots I need. But in saying that, it's probably made me a bit more of a thoughtful photographer. Instead of trying to get like loads of shots of something and then picking out the right one, I'm like, okay, I need to get a photo now. I can't mess around taking loads of shots. I just need to get something that's as good as I can get it. So it's probably made me a bit quicker at getting a decent photo, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, that actually prompts a question in my head, which is somewhat related but very practical, which is, what do you do about media management? Because you're on this trip. I mean, it started in October last year, months long. You're only in Colombia now. You've still got a way to go. What do you do about protecting the footage that you've basically captured? Like, are you overwriting your discs, or are you keeping everything? Are you sending stuff home? Obviously, it's impractical to send stuff up to the cloud because typically these files are just too big. So what do you do? Is this kind of thing that you wake up in a sweat in the middle of the night going, oh, what am I don't want to lose my stuff. There's so much sort of IP connected with all this footage. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, it's a game, I can tell you that. Because now everything's 4K and all the files are massive. And even when I'm filming something, I'm like, I don't want to film it for too long because it's going to be a huge file size, So, there's a few things that play on the mind. But basically, I've got two external hard drives. I think they're 2 terabytes each. And basically, not every day, but every day that I'm filming, I usually try and take everything off the cameras, put it directly on the external hard drive. And that's where I work off. When I'm editing videos, I work off the external hard drives. And then I might just go, when I start editing a video, I might just see like which ones are complete rubbish, and just toss them in the bin. And then I'll create the video. Once the video is done, usually what I'm doing now is, because the drives are starting to get a bit full, and I have actually managed to put some stuff up in the cloud whenever I get some decent Wi-Fi. And if I remember, I'll try and start shifting a bit of stuff up onto the cloud to free up some more space. But I use Premiere Pro as my editing software, and you can actually consolidate. You can open one of the videos I create. I can open the video file and then consolidate all that footage, which consolidates only the files that I used. So instead of me like manually going through and tossing out all the ones that I didn't use, I just package up that file and then put that on the hard drive, and then delete all the other footage. So all the stuff that didn't get used, because you have to be ruthless. Like, I love to keep everything, but there's only so much space on these drives that I have. So you just got to be like, I just got to let that go. Just toss it in the bin, and then I've just got the files that I used in that video. Because later, probably when I finish this trip, I'll come back and make probably like a film or two. Just consolidating all of these episodes that I've done, just picking out the best things, creating a bit of a story around it, and making it into maybe a 40-minute, 1 hour long film, something like that.
Your episodes range from sort of 10 minutes up to some are, I think, of approaching half an hour, maybe 25 minutes, something like that, but typically around 20 minutes, say. What file size, this consolidated file that Premiere Pro spits out for a 20-minute episode, what's the file size, just to get an idea of how much data we're talking about?
Yeah, it does range. Obviously, it depends on how long the episode is, but I think on average, maybe about 80 gigabytes, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Your Americas trip, which you're currently on, it's not your first rodeo. You spent 5 years living in Britain and filmed a number of series based on your travels around the UK and Ireland. It's also no surprise that you've created motorcycle-based content in your time in New Zealand, obviously. But what's drawn you now to the Americas as you're traveling from the south to the north?
Yeah, South America and Central. I have been to Mexico before, just for a short trip. And I really loved Mexico. Maybe that's what planted the seed, just about the culture and the vibe here. And I always wanted to come to this part of the world. And with all my previous experience with motorcycle travel. I felt like I was ready to do something bigger. I've done 7 months backpacking before, which was in Asia, and that involved a bit of motorcycle riding. Like I bought these crappy motorbikes with a bunch of people I met in Vietnam. We did the length of Vietnam, and other times I rented the motorbike. But yeah, I haven't done like a really, really long trip like this on a motorbike. So I felt like I was ready for that. And just going back to when I was younger, I think the first thing that planted the seed was seeing the long way around when I was maybe like, I don't know, 12 or 14 years old. I didn't have any interest at all in motorbikes, but I think just seeing those big old GSs, and I think it was more about the adventure, just the like crazy stuff they were getting up to, and just that raw adventure. They kind of planted the seed, so that kind of influenced me a bit as well, I think.
Tell me, because I've watched most of your South American series. I'm only in Bolivia still, so I'm a few months behind where you are. But one thing that I thought, and I wanted to ask you as a fellow New Zealander, that a lot of the shots, a lot of the coverage that you did around Patagonia, it looked a lot like New Zealand to me. Is that your impression as well, that you could take some of those places and just put them straight into New Zealand? And I'm not talking necessarily about the mountains. I'm talking about the rolling hillsides as well as some of the mountains, sure. But it just had, I don't know, it was the quality of the light or something as well. It just really seemed like New Zealand. Am I crazy to think that? But what's your, would you compare that in the same way as well?
No, you're 100% correct. It was very similar. Going through Chile, the Carretera Austral, which is the main road that runs up through Chile in the south of Patagonia. Very, very similar. And yeah, quite often I sort of had a nostalgic, feeling, because it felt like New Zealand, even the forests you're going through, the windy roads, and then you've got, the mountain ranges, you've got glaciers, or even the lupins on the side of the road, exactly the same, And that was probably the thing that gave me the most nostalgia, because times I've been through New Zealand, you got all the lupins on the side of the road. It was exactly the same. But in Patagonia, it's just on a bigger scale. It's kind of like going down the west coast of New Zealand, parts around there, but just on, if you can times it by 10 in terms of scale, it's just so much bigger.
Yeah. After watching quite a few of your videos from that part of the trip, I just thought, it just looks like New Zealand. It just looks amazing. I want to ask you about the equipment that you're traveling with as a traveling filmmaker. So what equipment are you carrying for capturing the footage? And then also, what do you have with you for the post-production work?
So I've got a drone. I've got a DJI Air 3S. I did have the Air 3, but in Argentina it malfunctioned and crashed. So I had to buy a new one. The old one did get replaced under warranty, which is a long story. But so I've got the drone. I've got 2 action cameras, the Insta360 Ace, and then the Go 3 Mini. So I put the Ace on my helmet, and sometimes use it for like just filming other stuff. Like if I'm walking around talking, sometimes it's easier than using the bigger camera. And then I've got the Insta Go 3S, I think it is, which I have facing my face on the bars, and that has a little removable small camera, so I can put that. It's quite handy if you want to, say if I'm going through customs or immigration and I want to be cheeky and film it, I can just, there's a necklace you wear with a magnet, and you can just pop that little camera on there, and it's very, very stealthy and discreet. So that's kind of my undercover camera. And then I've got the DSLR, so I've got a Canon R5 with a 24 to 70mm lens.
Okay.
So that's all the camera gear.
Just a question on the drone. So that drone must be, that's a bigger drone. That's not one of the sort of the micro drones, the less than 250 grams. I don't want you to incriminate yourself here, but what does that mean in terms of being able to legally fly in areas in South America? And is that a problem from country to country, or are the regulations pretty much the same in different countries? Or would you just like me to go on to the next question?
I can answer it. I don't know what if I'm doing, honestly, is legal or illegal half the time, but it's South America, so nothing's very legal or illegal. It's a bit of the Wild West, so I don't really think many people bother. But I do try and if there's like a place where it says don't fly, you can't fly drones, then I won't. I'll respect that and not fly my drone. I did mess up once in Peru, didn't see the signs until I got to this place called Corral Supe, which is an ancient heritage site. And then when I got there, I saw the sign saying no drone after I'd already flown it and filmed the site. And then I got approached by two officials after I did the tour, and they said, you need to delete all that footage, like now, sort of thing. So I have gotten myself in trouble once. But yeah, I mean, with the drone I have now, back home, you're not supposed to fly it in built up suburban areas. So I don't usually do that, but sometimes I do. But I just be very careful. I'm not flying it a kilometer out around the town sort of thing. It's just, I might just be on the hotel roof and just fly it up, and just have a quick look around. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you're using Premiere Pro. So I assume you're working off a laptop. Is there any other software or anything else you're using in post-production that makes a big difference? The kind of stuff that you just could not leave behind that you had to have with you?
I think I can basically do everything on Premiere Pro. Like for the intro that I've created on my series, I did use After Effects because when the title pops up, I've kind of got myself on the motorbike overlaid over the title. So it overlaps a bit and you can't have to use After Effects for that. But apart from that, I've barely used After Effects. So yeah, just Premiere Pro and then Photoshop for like making the thumbnails, things like that. And also Lightroom for editing the photos that I sometimes throw into the mix with my footage. Yeah.
Right. And do you do all your color grading inside Premiere Pro?
I do. Yeah. Yeah. What I'll do is when I piece together a video, when I shoot with the drone and the DSLR camera, I shoot with the flat profile. So I need to basically bring those back to normal levels in post before I even like put a LUT or a grade over the top of it. So I'll go through all the footage and just tweak everything that needs to be balanced, balance all the levels so everything is nice and bright. Can be a bit of a pain sometimes. And then I have basically a grade that I've used for all of the videos now, and I just dump that on top. It has a bit of a vignette, and then another one that has a certain, LUT grade that I just plonk on the top. Yeah.
And can you use that same approach with all your cameras?
Yeah, kind of like with the action camera footage, usually I don't need to touch that. I just plonk the grade on top and it's good. Sometimes I might, some of the footage might look a bit dark, so I need to boost it up and lighten the shadows type thing. But yeah, most of the work goes into like particularly the drone shots, I try and put a bit more focus and effort into those because they're usually the most cinematic and nice looking shots.
Yeah, and I certainly noticed that as well. What's your solution for your voiceover narration? Because you do put quite a bit of voiceover into what you're doing. I assume that you're often in pretty unkind acoustic environments. So what do you do to try and get the best sound from your voice?
Yeah, that's always a fun one. I've got a shotgun microphone that I use. I get into the laptop. I use that. I kind of hate it when I have to do the voiceovers on the videos because it is a hassle and it's just then I have to try and talk in a way that's appropriate for the video, but it requires a bit of effort. And yeah, it depends on the accommodation. Like at the moment, I've got my own private room, but it's been quite a mix at the moment of either staying in a hostel with like a shared dorm or staying in these hotel rooms. And usually, most of the time, whenever I need to do it, it's okay. But yeah, if I'm like in a hostel and there's other people around, I'm trying to time it when there's no one in the room because it's a bit embarrassing if you're talking like an idiot, repeating yourself 10 times trying to get the line right. So yeah, that's always a fun one. But I try and when I'm creating the videos, I try and say as much as I want to say on camera, so I don't have to do the voiceover. But sometimes when I create episodes, I'm like, okay, I need to provide a bit more context here, or I didn't give enough information about this archaeological site that I was at, so I need to do a bit more research and then explain that with the voiceover.
In terms of crafting a story, are you trying to document everything, like all your experiences, or are you being very selective about what you capture?
No, I don't record everything. I think it's important to have some time off, and sometimes you're going to be going somewhere for a day or two or three where it's not going to be very interesting. Like sometimes when I was in Argentina, you're going down this long straight road for like the whole day, and it's just like, well, why am I going to film that? It's completely boring, And I think it's important to take some time off and breaks from filming all the time, because if you're just constantly doing it day after day after day, it can start to get a bit tiring and a bit stale. So I think it's a tricky balance, but just making the time to not film, but also being prepared if something unexpected happens, because sometimes you don't want to be filming, but then maybe you get something mechanical happens, or you get some sort of unexpected situation and you're like, okay, I kind of have to film this. So it's a balance of kind of planning, having some time off, but also being prepared to be spontaneous as well.
That reminds me, there's a sequence, I don't know if it was in Chile or Peru, you'll have to correct me, where you had an off on the bike and the camera was running at the time. So it's kind of quite spectacular. And basically the whole episode's built around that off. How many times have you missed things? Like when you thought, oh, would it be great if I had the camera on then? That would have made a brilliant sequence or something. I mean, have there been any notable missed opportunities?
Not that many, actually. I was lucky to capture that crash because, I just happened to have the camera on at that time, So, it was like an unlucky situation, but lucky I had the camera on so I could analyze the footage even, just to see what went wrong.
Yeah, I thought that was quite funny because I was watching and thinking, oh, watch out for that shadow, watch out for that shadow. And you put your front wheel into the shadow and that's where and I could just imagine that happening. And then you sort of later on, you were going back and, oh, yeah, that's in shadow with that area. No wonder I could see that loose gravel. I thought, yeah, I could see it. It was quite, I thought it was quite funny how you went through back and looked at that and analysed it and figured out how it actually happened. And just going back to what I was asking, and I think you sort of touched on it, but is it a struggle to avoid falling into a pattern of just making the same type of episode over and over again? And what do you do? I mean, you sort of mentioned that you have days off, which is good, but is there anything else that you're doing to sort of combat that danger of falling into just making the same episode day after day?
Yeah, I think that the trip sort of naturally just provides opportunities to not make things repetitive. And I think I'm sort of like always actively aware of like the last episodes I've made. I'm always aware if things are starting to get repetitive. And maybe that's a question for you. Like, do you think anything's gotten repetitive at any point since you've been watching? But if I feel like things are getting a bit, same, then I'll be like, okay, maybe I need to go and explore something different, or maybe it's time to do some hiking again. And I think that's kind of a good thing about doing this as well, is it forces you to kind of step out of your comfort zone and try some different things. Like the other day I went horse riding. I've never been horse riding before. And it wasn't necessarily to be like, oh, I just want to go horse riding so I can film it on the GoPro sort of thing. But, it's sort of like, oh, if I did horse riding, that would be kind of interesting. It would, be an opportunity to capture that experience as well. So, it's the other thing with doing this kind of thing is still feeling like you're doing something because you want to, not necessarily because you think it's going to be good on camera,
Yeah. I do quite like the fact that you don't feel that it all has to be about motorcycles the whole time. The motorcycle is just the way that you're getting around. It's not necessarily the whole focus of the trip. And actually, if you go back and look at something like The Long Way Round, all that series of films, there's not actually that much about motorcycles in them. They're just sort of like the vector to get from A to B. And it brings a focus and it sort of structures how things happen. But there's a lot else going on. And certainly that's what I found with your stuff. And so I think there's quite a lot of variety. And I think you're also lucky in South America because you are moving through not just different geography, but also different cultures. I'm sure you've noticed that Bolivia was completely different to Chile and Argentina and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
How much of your traveling day do you spend filming? Like, would the trip be over by now if you weren't doing so much filming?
Yeah, that's a good question. The trip wouldn't be over because I don't like to travel too fast. I see some people and they do like what I'm doing, from Mexico down to the bottom of Argentina. They do it in 6 months. And I remember meeting one guy on a bike traveling from the States down, and met him in Chile, in Patagonia, and he just looked absolutely exhausted because he'd done it in, 6 months. And you're just riding all the time. And like, for me, that isn't enjoyable. Obviously, people do enjoy that. They just love riding. They're not too fussed about doing much else. They just love the ride, which is absolutely fine. But for me, I get a bit bored and tired if I'm just riding all the time. It's hard on the body. You get tired, and I feel like you're not really embracing or taking in anything that you're going through. Like, I like to spend time in places and meet people and absorb the culture, and you only really get that if you spend some time in different places. So, yeah, I think even without the filmmaking, I'd still be, taking my time.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I've noticed that your Spanish has improved quite a lot since you started. Is that fair to say? Because it seems like from when you first arrived, because I think you arrived in Argentina, didn't you? Is that right?
Correct, yeah, Buenos Aires.
So you sort of had a handful of phrases and that was about it. But once you got all the way down and then back up towards, like, I'm in Bolivia now and you've moved on to where you actually are now, which is Colombia. So I'm sure it's even gone further. But the fact that you're practicing it every day, have you really found that you've got quite a handle on the language, like sort of good sort of shopping, directions, hotels, that kind of Spanish?
Yeah, I found like the last probably 2 months, I feel like pretty comfortable with the basics now. Understanding is still a bit of a challenge. Like, I've met a lot of people, say from France, but they already speak a Latin language. So even if they don't speak much Spanish, they can usually understand what the person's saying. But coming from New Zealand, where, basically hardly anyone speaks another language, at least fluently, I think it's a bit tougher for, English speakers who haven't learned another language or don't speak their mother tongue isn't from a Latin language. So, yeah, it's nice to feel a bit more comfortable now, because for the first, 5 months or something, especially coming down the east coast of Argentina where I started, no one spoke English. So, and I sort of just ignorantly kind of assumed that more people would speak English, because when I traveled through Southeast Asia, it was pretty easy because a lot of people still spoke a little bit of English,
Yeah.
But yeah, it really forced me out of my comfort zone. But yeah, it would be nice to be better. But I mean, I've still got another 5 months or so. So, and I go through phases where I put a bit more effort and do like a Spanish lesson every morning kind of thing. And then for like the past few months, I've actually been a bit lazy because I've kind of gotten all right at the basics now. So I haven't put in too much effort. But now I'm trying to do a little bit more, because yeah, it's just nice when you can try and have a bit of a conversation with someone. Yeah.
Yeah. And have you found, as you've gone down the East Coast and then come up the West Coast, have you found going through those different countries and territories that people's accents change and maybe even some of the dialects, some words they use are different?
Oh, yeah. Argentina, even with my little Spanish, I could hear the different accents. Like, when I started getting a bit of a handle of things, I, met someone from somewhere in the north of Argentina, could not understand a word he was saying. And yeah, so like Argentina, I found they spoke quite fast. Chile, they don't pronounce the words properly. They're kind of like the Australians of South America. So there's a lot of slang. They sort of half pronounce things, kind of like Kiwis as well, I guess.
Yeah.
But since then, like Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, and now Colombia, they do speak a bit slower and more clearly. So, which has been nice, getting the hard territory out of the way first, and now it's a bit, easier to understand people.
Right. Cool. Okay, heavy question. Are you publishing the type of films that you thought you would be before the journey began?
I think so. Yeah, like my sort of goal was just to just document what I'm doing. I'm not trying to be someone who I'm not. I'm not trying to fake anything. I'm just this is me traveling and this is me documenting it. So I didn't really have any particular expectation. I was just, I'm just filming what I'm doing and then putting as much effort into the post production as I can to try and, once again, going back to that earlier thing we talked about, replicating the kind of emotions and feelings that I was feeling at the time, which is why I put a bit of effort to getting the right music that I'm using on the videos. Like, say, if I'm just writing down a video, the sun's out, that day I'm feeling pretty relaxed, I'll use a song that I'd probably be listening to on my headphones, something like that, to kind of reflect what I'm actually feeling. So, yeah, it's just been about trying to best reflect the experience through film.
So is it fair to say then that you don't feel a tremendous pressure from the YouTube audience to make a certain type of film, that you're quite comfortable making the film that you want to make, and if people like it, that's great. If they don't, well, there's plenty of other stuff for people to look at on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be nice to have some more views. I'm still trying to figure out how you get that algorithm right and get the title and the thumbnails right. And like I said, I've tried to be quite honest with some titles and thumbnails, and then other times I'm just experimenting with making it a little bit more clickbaity. I don't want to be dishonest or anything.
Mm.
And I've got that in the feedback. Some people have said, I felt a bit misled with how you titled this video, sort of thing. So it's just, it's a bit of a learning exercise. I'm not trying to piss anyone off or anything. I'm just having a play around,
Yeah.
just seeing if it goes anywhere. If I get like lots of views and I generate some more income, that's great. But if I don't, I'm just doing something that I enjoy. So at the end of the day,
Yeah. Well, talking about the audience a little bit, I guess, I've been aware of your work for over a year now. So I started watching sometime last year, and I've had members of my audience bring your work to my attention.
okay,
And, others have even suggested, hey, you've got to get Logan on. He'd be a good guest for the show. And I said, yeah, absolutely. Plus, he's a Kiwi, so, he gets in the front of the line kind of thing. I guess the thing that has always stuck out for me is the look of the videos. I mean, they look quality. For want of a better description, they look cinematic. And I'm pretty sure that's the look you're trying to achieve. How do you achieve that? Could you maybe just reveal a few secrets and go into depth, talk about frame rates, shutter speeds, focal lengths, depth of field, all the good stuff. Just maybe give us some sense of the care that you take in capturing the footage to end up producing, what you do produce in the final films.
yeah. I always like to make things cinematic, and that goes back to just my interest in film and music as well. I really appreciate films with amazing cinematics, like the latest Dune movies. I think they pushed cinematography to a new level. So I really do appreciate cinematography more than a storyline in a movie. It's great if the movie has a great story, but if the cinematography is amazing, I'm not really that bothered about the story, So and then in terms of trying to achieve that look, firstly it comes down to using all the right settings. So I'll film everything in 25 frames per second, and then the shutter is double that, so 50. Actually, with my helmet camera, I film that in 50 frames per second with the shutter speed at 100, because then that, if say with the crash, I was able to slow that down. Yeah, because if you put that clip at 50% speed, then it essentially goes back to 25 frames per second, but at half the speed, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So getting all the settings right is crucial to start with, and then just being quite, especially with the drone, being quite meticulous with getting a variety of shots of whatever I'm filming. So I've got some options in post production, and just being like nice and smooth with the controls.
I've seen in one of your earlier videos, you've also explained how you need to use ND filters if it's too bright, etc. And I think you use the ND filters on the drone as well, don't you?
Yeah, so on this trip, I've got the drone comes with ND filters, so always have them on the drone, because I can watch a video and I can instantly tell if they don't have the camera settings right, because it doesn't have that nice fluid motion like you see in the movies, because they don't have the settings right. They don't have an ND filter on it. The shutter speed's way too high, and for me that like jars quite a lot. I do have a ND filter on my action camera as well. Unfortunately, I cracked the screen on the rear of the camera, which makes it a bit harder to use now. If I want to adjust the settings, I have to connect my phone to it and do it that way. So I've kind of gotten a little bit lazy with getting the exact settings on my action camera. I just basically put it on auto mode now. I set the shutter speed to 50, but put it on auto, and then I have an ND filter on it. And most of the time it looks pretty good. You get a bit of motion blur, but sometimes if it's very bright, it might not look quite as good. But that's just one thing that I've kind of accepted, is when I'm doing this long form journey, You can't get everything perfect because it just takes more time to set everything up. And when you're
Yeah.
going for this long, when I'm putting out a video each week, it is a bit more raw, it is a bit more vloggy than some of the other stuff where it is a bit more cinematic, but it's more of a film kind of thing. And I would say, the majority of the time the audience doesn't even know the difference anyway, right? Particularly with like action camera footage. Yeah.
Yeah. When you were doing the UK stuff, which there's a lot of beautiful footage there, was the fact that it was often cloudy, was that helpful?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. When it's overcast, you don't have to worry about midday blown out shadows because
Yeah.
the lighting's flat, right? So when the sun's out, obviously the morning and the afternoon are the best times because the sun's gone down, the lighting's a bit soft, you get the nice colors and you don't get those harsh shadows.
Yeah. I know that you used to muck about on 125cc bikes. So what sort of upbringing did you have? I mean, were there motorcycles at home? Did you have a mate? Were you on a farm? I need some backstory, Logan.
Yeah, I never actually rode bikes when I was younger. When I was like probably like 18 or something, some of my mates bought some little 125cc pit bikes.
Okay.
I had a couple of burns on one of those, so I learned how to use the clutch and like rip up and down the beach sort of thing. But yeah, not really any motorcycle experiences at all. Like my dad, he did ride motorbikes for a little bit when he was, I think, maybe 18 years old, but I think he had a couple of stacks and then decided to put the bike away after that. No, it was really just watching the long way round that kind of planted the seed. And then it wasn't until I was in Asia, I had no intention of even renting a scooter because like a lot of the time they won't, your insurance won't cover you, sort of thing. But then you just meet lots of other people. Everyone's on the scooters, on the bikes, and you're like, "Oh bugger it, I'll just give it a go." And
Yeah.
and then it went from there.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you get your license in New Zealand or did you get your license in the UK? Because I connect your riding basically with the UK, but yeah, where'd you get your license?
In the UK, yeah. So like, did a bunch of riding in Asia, but had no license. Well, yeah, it wasn't until I was in the UK I was like, okay, I should, if I want to keep doing the bike thing, I should probably get a license. So yeah, did the because I was over 25, and I think when you're over 25, you can just go all the way to your full license pretty quickly. So I just went through the whole process, had a 125 for the 6 months or whatever time frame it was you needed to own it for, and then moved on to the 600 after that.
Yeah. Tell us why you took the Suzuki DR650 to South America. And based on everything you've experienced with that bike, do you think it was a good decision to take that bike?
Very good decision. Yeah, expensive, cost me a lot of money to send it over, but that wasn't the original plan. I was going to sell that, and then I was probably going to buy a Tenere 700 when I got over here. Then when I started doing research into it, I realized Argentina has super high inflation at the moment. So everything's like triple the price. You buy a cell phone, triple the price than it would be in anywhere else in the world. Plus crossing borders. If you're a foreigner and you own an Argentinian bike, complicated to cross borders. If you buy a bike in Chile, you can cross borders, but technically they say you should have your bike back within the country after 180 days of being outside of the country. I mean, there's no way they can police that if you just keep going. But it just seemed more complicated to try and buy something over there. And then I spoke to other people who had done South America on a motorbike as well, people from New Zealand, and they'd done it on a DR650, and they were just like, if you can afford to send your own bike over, do it. They do it on a DR650 because it's going to be reliable, and it has been. It's been very good.
You've essentially been a solo traveller. Is that your preference, or is it sort of a compromise, a consequence of the type of filmmaking that you want to do?
Yeah, it's I've always been quite independent and enjoyed solo travel because you can still meet a lot of people while you're traveling, and if anything, it forces you to meet new people because you have to put yourself out there. Because you can't be alone all the time. There are times where I have felt a bit lonely, and then I'm like, okay, I need to go and stay at some hostels again and just have some more social interaction because the language barrier with Spanish has been difficult. So I haven't been able to converse with locals as much as I would have liked to. And on this trip, yeah, there have been times where I'm like, you know what, this would actually be nice if I was doing the trip with someone as well. So yeah, it's a hard one to pick, because even if you do go with someone, I've heard of some people who will do a motorbike trip and then they have a falling out with who they're with and then they go their own ways, sort of thing. So finding the right person to do something like this with is also very difficult. And with me, because I'm into like climbing and hiking, that sort of thing as well, yeah, finding that right person to do it with is kind of difficult as well. So yeah, I've kind of limited myself to basically doing it solo because I'm doing the filmmaking thing, which if you had someone else with you and they're not interested in being part of that, they're not doing it with you, then it's going to affect the filmmaking that you're doing, isn't it? Because yeah, you're going to have less time, and yeah.
For sure. You mentioned the climbing, and am I right in thinking that you've only relatively recently taken up climbing? Is that correct?
Climbing outside has been fairly recent, only the past couple of years. I started when I was in the UK bouldering indoors. So I did that for, I guess, like 3 years until I moved back into New Zealand. And then I started climbing outside. And then after I started climbing outside, I was like, oh, this is far better than going to the gym. So I've flipped the gym off, and yeah, I've really I put the last place I was living before I came here was in Takaka in Golden Bay. There's a place called Paynes Ford, which is one of the best crags in New Zealand for climbing. So I moved there purely, basically for the climbing, so I could, climb a few days a week and just excel as much as I could. And then basically, so when I came here, I'd be more confident. And because with climbing, you've got like a grading system, and you sort of know whereabouts you are on that grading system. But the more experienced you are, the more opportunities and options you have when you go to other places like where I am now.
I know nothing about climbing, and I'm going to ask you a question. It may be the stupidest question in the world, but there is some thought behind it, which is because I often bore people on this podcast talking about my experience scuba diving, and I sometimes see some parallels between scuba diving and motorcycling, just some certain aspects. But what I wanted to ask you, are there any parallels between motorcycling and climbing?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, both have dire consequences if you get it wrong. So there is that. Climbing is actually, despite what most people think, it's actually quite a safe sport. It's as dangerous as you want to make it, just like motorcycling is. If you're just cruising along and you're taking it easy, it's not so bad. But if you're going like full tilt the whole time, you're going to come off at some point. This is the same with climbing. If you're pushing the boundaries and the limits, especially with trad climbing, where you're placing your own protection, if you get it wrong, you can have a big accident. So it's just yeah, like risk management is I think is a bit of a parallel between the two, and also scaring the crap out of yourself sometimes as well is a parallel between the two.
What about, I mean, famously, we always talk about the mental health benefits of motorcycling. Do you see mental health benefits for you personally of going for a climb?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, that's probably half the reason why I do it, because it's getting outside of nature. You get that release. You get a bit of an adrenaline dump when you're doing it. So I think it helps, yeah, just release stress and anxiety. And then also the connections and friends you make. Everyone's quite open minded and thinks alike who climbs. I think it attracts kind of a certain type of character. So you don't get too many egos in the climbing world, which is really nice. So it's really a good opportunity to meet other people. And then you form quite close connections with people quite quickly, because I think, well, basically, when you're belaying someone's climbing, and you basically have essentially their life in your hands. So there's an element of trust. And I think when you're hanging out with some people and combining those kind of things, the trust and everything, you sort of you gel and bond quite quickly. Yeah, you make friends quite fast. So yeah, I think there's massive benefits with climbing. Yeah, for a lot of reasons.
Okay, just some final questions. With regards to your own filmmaking, who have you taken inspiration from, and who would you recommend others to watch?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I'm actually pretty bad with naming out particular places where I get influence, because I think for me my influence has sort of been a lifetime of watching film, listening to music, that kind of thing. I never really have any, in terms of say motorcycle filmmakers, I tend to not actually really watch that much. I don't exactly know why. I think I just prefer to do it rather than watch it, kind of thing. But yeah, just through watching films throughout my life, documentaries as well, the long way around kind of thing. But yeah, I think my biggest influences would just be certain filmmakers, really, I don't know, Christopher Nolan, Quentin Tarantino, and just the things that they do with cinematography, because that's obviously a big focus of mine. Just paying attention to the way they cut scenes and the way that the movies are styled, stuff like that. So yeah, for me, it's more about just the films I've seen throughout the years, as opposed to any particular figure or channel on YouTube or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so finally, I have to ask, does the film making enhance or diminish the pleasure of a motorcycle ride for you?
For me, it enhances it. There definitely is a balance, because if you're just constantly thinking about the film all the time, then you're taking away from the experience. And if you're doing everything to do with the films, then it's just are you really enjoying the travel? Are you really enjoying the trip? Are you having a good experience, or are you just solely focusing on trying to please an audience on YouTube, So for me, it's just getting that balance right. And that involves, taking breaks. I'll get a bunch of footage, and then, I might have 3 episodes in the bank, and then I can just be I can chill out and not worry about the filmmaking. Even if I miss some things, even if something is quite interesting, I can just be no, I'm not filming. I'm just going to purely enjoy this experience and not bothered with that. But I think the more you do it, the less stressed you get about the filmmaking process, and you can just kind of flick on your camera, and it just feels more natural, and it's just something else that's on recording, and you're not anxious thinking about, is this shot going to be good? I need to switch the camera on and off here, blah, blah, blah. You just kind of relax a bit and you get used to it, and then it becomes less of a hassle. It just becomes part of the trip and something you don't have to focus on as much.
Thanks so much for being my guest for this episode, Logan. Please tell listeners where they can find your work online.
It's been a pleasure, Simon. Thank you very much. You can find me on Escape Artist Media on YouTube. I also have Instagram. The handle is @escapeartist.media. I also have my own website, which is escapeartist.media. And I've tried to keep everything nice and uniform. And I do have a Patreon page as well, which you can find, I believe, if you just type in Escape Artist Media. And that has a small monthly fee, and I put a bit of bonus content up there. I put some travel blogs up there as well, and you get discounts to my store, escapeartist.media, which has photography, prints, and merchandise.
Cool, and I'll put the links to everything in the show notes. Look, thanks again. I'll be following your progress north as you document it and publish it to YouTube. But look, take care and ride safe.
Thanks, Simon. A pleasure. Cheers, mate.